It's so good to see everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I was planning on doing a talk kind of like I did for my last show, where we just kind of walked around and talked about some things. But then I said, oh, it'd be interesting to kind of talk about like some artists who have had influences on me. And I was thinking about people I've worked with, so I made a couple slides. And then that led me to making some more slides, and some more slides. So it's a whole slideshow. I think it's helpful when you're looking at my work, you look at my work and you look at Rembrandt and you say, what? What's happening here? So I think it's a nice place to start because so much of my interest in photography and so much of my sort of history as an artist has to do with painting in different ways, especially painters like Rembrandt. When I was in college, I was a studio art and art history double major, and I sort of finished the studio art major like kind of by the time I was done with my sophomore year. I had classes to do, I had my thesis to do, but I had taken a lot of the classes. So I sort of had these 2 years, and I was thinking, oh man, what am I going to do? I want to find a different major. And I took Art History 101, the class that everybody hates, and I was like, man, this is amazing. I should take another one of these classes. Anyway, I ended up doing a lot of work with the Dutch masters, studying them. I did a class where we did a survey course on them. Then we went to Belgium and the Netherlands and looked at the paintings in real life, which was incredible. Came back and did a research project on that. And then when I was in grad school, I was thinking pretty specifically about my study of the Dutch masters and how they looked at the world around them. And they were looking at very particular things, how trade influenced their lives. And they were celebrating how amazing that was. And I started to look at how could I think about trade in our lives, or how could I look at things in our life in a similar way to what they did, using the best optics that they could. Vermeer totally used the lens, and I think it's amazing. So how could I bring that into our lives? And I loved Rembrandt, and I love this self-portrait. Just what kind of space, circles in the background. And the way he has his palette, too, I thought a lot about that act of making pictures, or painting, right? He's, in many of Rembrandt's self-portraits, he's dressed up as something else, as a, I don't know, a dandy on the scene or a drunkard or something. But in this self-portrait, he is Rembrandt the painter, and he's showing off his chops by this incredible curve that he has. He's got his palette and his brushes. So I said, what's my palette and what's my brush? I am not a painter. I've never painted well with oils or acrylics. But I do know how to use the contemporary tools at my disposal, Photoshop, Illustrator, so on. And I also was thinking, like, Rembrandt didn't choose to be a painter in the sense that he said, oh, it's such a quaint thing to be a painter. It was like, how can I have the best technology and make the most amazing works of art? And for him, that was oil paints and the pigments they could get and the oils that they could mix. For me, that's the technology and the computers. Even at this point, so I'm going to try to come back to some themes here. So one of these themes is making, right? Being a maker and trying to show you, my audience, that I'm thinking about how these pictures, which are shiny or smooth anyway, and don't show any sort of record of how they got made, how I can show you in my pictures that they've been manipulated, that I've asserted my hand in some way. So in this one, it's the Wacom tablet and pen. And then I made this picture at the same time as well, which is a little bit of a partner to pull things back and to say, oh, there's no circles on the wall, right? Those are put in some other way, or this is the studio setup that allowed this to happen. It's all pretty theatrical. And this is a piece by Jeff Wall about this beautiful pavilion in Barcelona, the Mies van der Rohe Foundation Pavilion. And in order to maintain this pinnacle of modernism, we have the maintenance guy who comes in every morning, right? So Wall is showing us the marble, he's showing us the whole scene, the beautiful light, and the maintenance worker that makes it all possible. Courbet did something similar with the Stonebreakers. So I'm thinking about making and how these things are possible. These artists have talked about how spaces are maintained or manufactured in some way. So here's another picture of mine from grad school where I tried to show the fact that the space was being manufactured in some way, and then also to acknowledge who was doing that manufacture. Segundo and Raphael, in this case. And you can see my influence from people like Jeff Wall from the Barcelona Pavilion there. Or even in this one, which I made of myself just after I moved to Sacramento as I was moving into my apartment. Right? How does a living room get constructed? I'm not doing the same kind of dirty work that Segundo and Raphael were doing, but and I have been, I think, for some time, in tying together art making with space making. I'm not the only artist who's done this. This is Kaibo's floor scrapers from the sort of Impressionist period. Right, so think about that gesture and my gesture. I'm building an IKEA piece of furniture. They're scraping the floor by hand. We don't have to do this now because we have machines that let us do that, but we do have IKEA that probably everybody in this room has something, and you've done that action of struggling to build the IKEA furniture. So it's this mundane scene, right? A mundane scene that has to do with making. I think this has been something that's stuck with me for some time. Following along with that idea of bringing together mundane objects and trying to elevate them or think about them in relation to painting. This is a bouquet of real, fake, and dyed flowers, all put together. And these are just flowers that I went to a corner store and purchased. Nothing too fancy about it, but to me that's remarkable. And one of my favorite pieces of this photo is that corner right there, the way the texture of the wall has been weathered and that veneer is being pulled away a little bit. If you look carefully at this picture, you can see that the vase is full of real flowers, obviously fake flowers, but you may or may not know which flowers are dyed, and so there's this kind of space where you're not quite sure what's real, what's not real, what's somewhere in between. And that's another idea that I've come to time and again. Here's a bouquet I made a little bit later. This was, I think, 2013. So this is blossoms of silk and polyester. All fake flowers, but they're gorgeous. These are things that I went to the dollar store and bought for probably $10 total, maybe more. made a bouquet. So this is a little bit of an update of that last piece. There's something aesthetic about it. And again, it's this like cheap thing that's very everyday that you probably have encountered someplace. In this picture, though, I thought really carefully, not like this, where it felt more like a traditional sort of Dutch painting in front of some scene in the background. I thought really carefully about this intersection between the back of the wall and the front of the table. I also quite liked that the veneer on the table was coming up, peeling out of the way, as though revealing the structure, the same way that the floor scrapers peel up the varnish, that Segundo and Raphael were working on an open electrical box that I was showing you how I made the work. This is showing you how this table is built. And then visually, there's something graphic and almost abstract happening in that bottom left corner, even as the picture has that kind of drama of Dutch light. This is a picture from my last show, which I titled Vase. I think of this as a flower bouquet, or at least when I made it, I thought of it as a flower bouquet. The brush with the little tip is the flower, the green handle is the stem, the air blower or the baby snot sucker is the vase. But I've taken that bottom right corner where things are super graphic and almost abstracting, and that has taken over the piece. And I think that's what you see around you as well, where my interest in those ways that the camera transforms what you see has kind of come to the fore. The title of the show is A Mechanized Pencil, and that is an allusion to William Henry Fox Talbot's Pencil of Nature, which is one of the sort of seminal publications in photo history. 1844, that's like when the medium was invented. But even then, look at that angle of the shadow and the angle of the broom, and then the verticality of the door in front of this black rectangle. Talbot thought of these pieces as the way that the camera can capture what's there and show you what's there. And so much of this was about the technological kind of mastery of the medium and the medium existing. But I look at this now and I see things that I'm interested in doing as well. And look at how mundane this scene is. Again, just the door with a broom. No big deal, and yet through the camera it's become transformed into this diagonal composition and into something that we're still looking at well over 100 years later, nearly 200 years later. Here's another example, side of a barn. But look at that shadow. It's incredibly modern what is happening in some of these photographs. I mean, there's not a lot there in terms of the subject matter. Cups, doorways. But even at that time, Talbot was looking in this way, and some of what the camera does, some of the way the camera can abstract the world with its single point, single viewpoint, comes out in Talbot's work. So, coming back to this piece, look at the way that that shadow gets carried over onto that wood, or how the wood itself almost becomes like the marble in that Jeff Wall piece. This was just the palette that our printer at school got delivered on, but it had this incredible texture and reflectiveness that when you take away the context of the Epson printer sitting on top of it, it becomes a block of marble. And it allows that shadow to interact with it. Many of the pieces that you see in the show are made up of lighting grids or folding tables or insulation, things that go into building objects. I have a wall that's unfinished in the middle of the room. Part of this interest just came from being in the midst of redoing part of our house and seeing lots of plywood, seeing lots of painter's tape, seeing lots of mess around, but finding incredible beauty and texture in these things. I mean, look at the line work from the taping and the mud on the drywall. It's incredible what they're doing, not thinking about it as making lines in an artistic way, but the texture and the variation in line is beautiful. And so that's something that, in particular, I've been thinking about over the last couple of years. But I think that my interest in calling attention to the spaces that we inhabit, again, I think it's been going on for a while. So I've shown a lot of old painters, and I want to update some of my influences here. So this is a piece by Sarah Cabot, and I was an assistant on this piece. So it's a little bit hard to see, but there is track lighting in the ceiling, and then the ceiling is rotated and flipped upside down and put on the floor, and rotated onto the wall, and rotated onto the wall as well. So all of those other lights and tracks are made out of paper. So I help to construct the lights and arrange things, just so. I don't know why I have two slides here. There I am, pre-beard, working. It was very hard to find this image on the internet. It's there. I also remember seeing this, so this was like a blog post from the gallery on the assistants helping with the show, and I remember seeing it then and seeing it now, and then it like was a full screen image, and now it's like. So just to show you some other pieces that I assisted her on, this was a similar piece where we took a room and rotated it with paper. So these cans are replicas of this, rotated, I don't remember how many degrees in the room. And we replicated part of this heater as well. This one, we took every line and shifted it half an inch to the right and half an inch up. I think this piece is fantastic. She's a professor at the Cleveland Institute of Art. So Cabot's interest in the spaces around her, something that I think comes through here. This is a photograph of an installation that I made in my studio. So just some insulation on a pipe, and some ropes strung this way and that. But then for the camera, it becomes this line drawing. It becomes this completely different thing. It's not about space. It's just about light and color. Sarah Cabot's partner, Barry Underwood, both Cabot and Underwood were two very early mentors of mine. I would say that I'm standing here today because Barry was my teacher when I was in high school. So this is a piece of his called Lightning Bugs. And this is the setup before. It's very hard to see. But we arranged tiny little glow sticks. We just sort of tied them to the plants in the woods. And then with a long enough exposure, those lights become really brilliant. only works from a single vantage point. And this is something that I've played with in this show. Sorry, some of these are a little bit out of order. This is something that I've played with in this show, that you can encounter a piece like that one over there, the Open Studio one. It only worked from that one vantage point in my studio. If I was over by a foot, there was a light directly in the lens. If I was over by another foot, there was something blocking the lens. I'm going to try to zoom through these. See if I can do this. Nope. You get a preview of what I'm going to talk about. Well, I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to attempt to. Navigator. There we go. Perfect. So this idea, sorry, to come back to Underwood's work, this idea that there's something that you see, the fireflies, something that you see in the camera, and that holds up in a particular way for the camera, but that if you shift, it becomes something completely different. So I didn't adjust my setup between these two photographs, but on the left, that yellow line is a vertical line, it's a zip. I'll talk about that in a second. And in this, it's this kind of odd moire line that cuts through the grid in a little bit of a disconcerting way. And you see, oh, there's stuff on the floor, and so on. So let me go back here, back to this piece. This piece is called Zip Tie, and that's a reference to Barnett Newman and his zips. So he called these yellow lines down his canvases zips. And they're meant to activate the canvas. Sometimes they would take up this entire wall. So if Newman is taking that orange line and drawing it down and inviting you in and activating the picture with paint, perhaps I can do that with a piece of packing strapping. And then also ask you later in the show to revisit that scene and say, wait a minute, did I see that? Or did I not see that? That's an idea that I learned a lot about from this piece, Memory by Anish Kapoor. So this is all a single piece that is too big to fit in a room. So you can only encounter it from over here, and then over here, and then over here. So you can never see the entire thing all at once. The only way that you can experience the work is in your mind, in your memory. So as you walk through the space, I put at this wall so you can't look at every piece at the same time together. That you have to hold in your memory one piece and then you re-encounter maybe its partner. In other ways, this wall asks you to look at pictures next to each other. And this is something that I learned a lot about from this Christopher Williams show. Williams is an incredibly conceptual photographer where he has photographs like this, and the title is in German, and you just say, what? I mean, the title of the series of show is, for example, 18 leçons sur la société industrielle. You can tell I don't speak French. He's an American artist making pictures like this. But when you look at these two pictures next to each other in the gallery, or together in the gallery, maybe not next to each other, together, you start to think about, okay, maybe this is about color and how color gets put together. Right? There's something about the process of being in the darkroom and red and green, and I know those have something to do with photography, and then there's that green coming back again. So to come back to these, that encountering an image and then re-encountering a similar image or a related image later, that's something that I've worked very hard to build into this show, and something that I hope will delight and perplex you as you look at the show. So thank you so much. I hope that this is a little lead-in to looking at the work. I would love to answer questions. I'd love to stick around and talk with you. So if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them first.
I have a really boring question.
Not boring.
What are you printing on? I mean, it's such a nice, beautiful, rich matte, but it also doesn't look so fragile.
Right. It's printed on inkjet photo paper, and then it gets a laminate put on it. It's like a matte UV laminate. So it's like a UV laminate that you might see on a poster or something like that. But it gives it a surface that I think throws you for a loop.
There's still intimacy. It's not super shiny. And
Right. It cuts down on the glare,
it
which
looks
is
a little
really
protected
nice.
too.
And it is a little protected. Having recently wiped some things off of that. Thank you. Please look at the work. I'd love to talk with you about it. Thank you so much for coming.